The wind was blowing hard across Dust Vale, dragging grit through the empty streets like it meant to skin the town raw. Paint peeled off the old saloon shutters. The church bell hung silent on its rope. A dead dog lay stiff beneath the blacksmith's awning, flies fat with the heat. And behind the scorched remains of the Wilcox barn, a girl was eating mud. She crouched low in the shadow of the half-burnt timbers, her fingers dark and trembling, scooping the earth like it had once meant something. Her skin was dust and bruises. Her hair hung in knots. She didn't notice the flies, or the way the wind caught her rags and flapped them like a warning flag. She didn't notice the man on the road, either. But he noticed her. Elias Granger stopped walking and squinted into the sun. One arm hung by his side, leather coat draped to hide the empty sleeve. His other hand rested on the hilt of a knife, strapped at his hip. Not fear, just habit. He looked at the girl for a long time before speaking. Long enough to know she wasn't a ghost, despite what the townsfolk whispered. "Hell," he muttered. "You're real." She didn't respond. Her fingers kept moving. Clay packed under her nails. Bits of gravel stuck to her tongue. He took a step forward, boot crunching dry weeds. "Don't got to do that," he said, voice dry as the canyon walls. "Ain't nothing in that dirt but what the rest of us left behind." She stopped moving. Her head rose an inch. One eye peeked through the curtain of filth and hair. Elias sighed. "I ain't gonna hurt you." The girl blinked. He took another step, then another. When he was 5 feet from her, he knelt slowly, knees cracking. "What's your name?" he asked. Silence. "You got a name." The girl's jaw clenched. She said nothing, but her body tensed like a stray dog cornered with a stick. Elias nodded to himself. "All right, I'll give you one, till you tell me better." She watched him, breath shallow. He tilted his head, studying her face, the burns on her arms, the half-healed gash beneath her collarbone. "You look like you've been left out here to rot." "Nothing." He stood, the bones in his back popping as he straightened. "Come in," he said. Then, as if it settled something, "You're my wife now." The girl's eyes narrowed, then widened. Her mouth opened, closed. "Not like that," Elias muttered, waving it off. "Just a word means you got a place. Means nobody's gonna haul you off or shoot you for scaring their children." Still, she didn't move. He turned and walked toward the old shack by the hill. "You want to stay out here. That's your choosing." She watched him walk away until he disappeared around the shed. Then she looked down at her hands, mud-caked, trembling. She pressed them to the ground again, then stopped. Her head turned toward the shack. By sundown, she was standing at the threshold. The place wasn't much. A single-room cabin with a stove that leaned to the left and a cot made of rope and sorrow. A sawed-off shotgun hung over the door. The air smelled like tobacco and liniment. Elias glanced up from the table, where he was cutting strips of jerky. He didn't smile. He didn't look surprised. "Found the door, did you?" She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Well, come on in then." She stepped inside, quiet as dusk. He handed her a tin plate. On it, beans, bread, something that might have once been pork. Her hand shook as she took it. She sat on the floor, not the chair. They ate in silence. Afterward, Elias poured water from a jug and slid it across the floor toward her. She drank until her shoulders stopped quivering. He lit a cigarette and leaned back. "Folks say you've been out there a long time," he said. She didn't answer. "Say you don't talk. Say you just stare. Make folks uncomfortable." No reply. He exhaled smoke through his nose. "I ain't like most folks." She looked up at him, eyes dark and unreadable. There was something coiled in them, like a spring held tight. Not fear. Not quite rage, either. Something harder to name. He pointed toward a corner of the room. "Blankets there. Cot's mine. You take the floor, or take the door. I won't bind you to anything." She stared at the blanket for a long while. Then she crawled toward it like it might vanish if she moved too fast. When the lamp burned low and the coyotes started their morning songs in the distance, Elias sat on the steps and watched the stars come out one by one. Behind him, the girl lay curled in sleep, or something like it, on the floor. He didn't know what she was, not yet. Broken, sure. But broken things had sharp edges. sometimes sharper than whole ones. He rubbed the scar where his arm used to be and whispered into the dark, "Ain't no such thing as coincidence." And from behind the door, the girl opened one eye. She was not asleep. Not yet. Not for years. But something inside her shifted at the sound of his voice. Tomorrow, the town would start talking. Elias Granger had brought a feral girl into his home and called her wife. People would wonder if he'd gone mad, if she was cursed, if old ghosts had returned. They'd be right in part. But for tonight, the house held two people, quiet and breathing. And something in the air, something just beginning to stir, felt like the wind before a fire. The days that followed were filled with a silence so thick, Elias began to feel its shape. It wasn't empty, just full of things unsaid. The girl moved like a shadow, always watching, never speaking. She kept to the edges of the shack, avoiding the sun, the mirror, and most of all him. He called her Maddie. It was a name he said out loud once, and when she didn't flinch or spit at it, he kept using it. Maddie peeled potatoes like she was stripping bark off a tree. She cleaned the knives without being told. She never asked questions, never smiled. The town buzzed. Some thought Elias had gone soft, dragging a lunatic in off the dirt and giving her a roof. Others whispered he'd found her for a reason, some dark debt being paid with flesh. But no one dared say it to his face. Elias Granger might have lost an arm, but folks remembered the man who once shot 3 bandits with his left hand while bleeding from his belly. At home, Maddie moved with strange precision. She tied knots without instruction, skinned a rabbit without wincing, drew things in the dirt when she thought he wasn't looking, symbols, skulls, snakes coiled around rifles. Elias wiped them away when she wasn't watching. Some drawings weren't meant to be remembered. He tried not to ask, but the questions pressed in. Who had taught her these things? Who had left her broken behind a burned-out barn? And why did he feel the echo of old nightmares when he looked in her eyes? One night, Elias found her standing barefoot behind the house, eyes fixed on the hills. Coyotes howled like the land was trying to remember its pain. "They're coming," she said. It was the first thing she'd spoken since stepping through his door. He didn't ask who. The next day, he went into town for supplies. Dust Vale looked the same as it always did, half sick and waiting for something worse. At the general store, Mrs. Turnbull leaned across the counter, her face pinched like she smelled rot. "You still got that girl in your shack?" "I do." She talked. "Enough." Turnbull clicked her tongue. Saw her once, staring at the church bell like she was thinking how to make it fall. Elias met her eyes. Some things deserve to fall. He left without waiting for his change. That evening, he caught Maddie outside with his old revolver. She was holding it backward, inspecting the weight. When she saw him, she didn't drop it, just flipped it around and pointed it at the fence. "Safety's busted," he said. "Gotta ease the hammer slow or it'll bite." She nodded once, adjusted her grip, and aimed again. He watched her shoulders tighten, saw the calculation in her jaw. Then she lowered it. "You shoot before?" he asked. "No," but something in her voice made it a lie. That night, Elias dreamed of the Red Vultures. He hadn't spoken their name in years. A gang that moved like smoke and killed like fire. He'd hunted them once, back when justice still had a name and his badge still had weight. But the badge hadn't stopped them from gutting his wife and burning his house. It hadn't saved the child wrapped in blankets in the cellar. When he woke, sweat soaked his back, and the stump where his arm used to be throbbed like an old tooth. Maddie was sitting at the foot of his cot. "They wore red coats," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "like crows with blood on their wings." He sat up slowly. "You saw them?" She nodded. "I lived with them." The words fell like stones in a well, deep and final. He said nothing, just waited. "I was small. They took me when they burned a ranch near Sable Creek. Said I was fast. Said I could be useful." Elias remembered the stories. Sable Creek, the McCrae family, gone without trace. Only ash and hoof prints. No survivors. Maddie continued. "They taught me to steal. To get a man quiet. To disappear." Her eyes flicked to the revolver on the table. "Then one night I failed. I dropped a match too soon. Fire caught the wrong wagon. They left me behind. said the weak rot first. Elias stood, walked to the stove, and poured 2 mugs of black coffee. He handed her one, his hand shaking slightly. You remember their names? Some. Her fingers curled tight around the cup. One they called Red Jack, leader, wore a long coat and a necklace of teeth. One-eyed man named Silas. A woman, Canary, they said she could cut a throat without spilling a drop. Elias nodded, eyes narrowing. I remember Red Jack. Maddie looked up sharply. I put a bullet in his leg once. Thought it'd slow him down. Didn't think he'd burn my life for it. Their silence stretched long and thin. We need to leave, Maddie said. No, he leaned against the stove. We need to finish this. Her eyes studied him. You think we can? Don't know yet. She stood. Then teach me. And so he did. In the mornings, they practiced with rifles behind the house. Maddie's aim improved fast, too fast. In the afternoons, he taught her how to track by prints, read wind, judge distance by breath. She listened without question, absorbed it all like a stone drinks sun. At night, she barely slept. Elias heard her muttering in her dreams, twisting under the blanket, like snakes coiled beneath her skin. One evening, while cleaning the revolver, Elias caught sight of her wrist. Beneath the grime, faint and faded, was a tattoo. He grabbed her arm, not rough, but firm. What's that? She tried to pull back. He didn't let go. The mark was a vulture, wings outstretched, claws red, head bent in blood. Elias dropped her hand. I didn't choose it, she whispered. They made us wear it. Proof of loyalty. His voice was hoarse. You still loyal? Her eyes met his, clear, fierce, no apology in them. I want them dead. That was enough. The next morning, the sky cracked open with thunder, though no storm came. Just heat and the smell of something approaching. Elias stood outside, staring at the hills. Maddie was behind him, lacing her boots. He spoke without turning. If they're coming, they'll come fast. And they'll come cruel. I know, she said. He looked back at her. She was taller now, or maybe just straighter. The dirt hadn't vanished, but it no longer clung like shame. The silence they shared wasn't empty anymore. It was the kind that came before action. He said, if we go down together. Maddie nodded. Together. And far off in the distance, carried by a hot wind, came the sound of hooves. Not one horse. Not 2. A dozen. Maybe more. The first corpse turned up near the old watering hole, throat slit clean and boots missing. Sheriff Ballard found it at dawn and rode straight into Dust Vale like the devil himself was on his heels. He didn't say much, just threw a bloodied hat on the saloon's floorboards and growled, They're back. No one had to ask who. The red vultures hadn't been seen in 5 years, but fear had a long memory in the frontier. Whispers spread like dry brush fire. Farmers locking their doors, ranchers hiding stock, mothers clutching children as if shadows could reach through walls. Elias was in the smith's shop, sharpening an old hunting knife, when the news reached him. He didn't blink, didn't pause, just kept working the whetstone until the edge could shave bark from a mesquite branch. Maddie was out by the creek, watching dragonflies skim the surface like ghosts. When he told her, her response was a slow exhale. How many? Sheriff reckons a dozen. Maybe more. Same mark on the body, cut neat, boots stripped, horse taken. Same way they always start. Test the edges before they burn the center. Her jaw flexed. Red Jack? Not sure yet, but if it's the vultures, he ain't far. That night, they cleaned the weapons. Elias laid out every piece he still owned. 2 rifles, 3 revolvers, the sawed-off shotgun, a boot knife, and a bowie blade that still had his wife's initials etched into the hilt. Maddie handled each with care, inspecting them like tools of memory. When she picked up the bowie, something in her eyes changed. Why'd you stop hunting them? She asked. Elias lit a cigarette, staring out the cracked window. I didn't stop, he said. They did. Disappeared after they torched that preacher's wagon train near Tomb Hollow. No tracks. No sightings. Like they knew someone was following. She said nothing, but he saw it in her expression, the question behind her eyes. Yes, he added. I was following. In the weeks that followed, Dust Vale prepared like a town waiting for rain, too slowly, and never enough. Ballard tried forming a posse, but half the men too young had no taste for blood, and the other half too old had seen what the vultures could do. Elias didn't sign up. He had no patience for noise and panic. He had something else in mind. At dawn, he started training Maddie in earnest. They rode the canyon passes, mapping every twist, every crevice that could hide a rifle or an ambush. They learned to move without sound, to signal with fingers and stone. Maddie already knew more than she let on. How to disappear behind a rise, how to tie a horse so it didn't whinny, how to reload in the dark. She never bragged, never explained, just absorbed. He watched her slice apples with surgical grace and knew, whatever she was before, she hadn't been a child long. One afternoon, while resting beneath a bluff, she told him a story. "They had names for us," she said, eyes fixed on the red rock overhead. "The ones they took. Called us chiclets. Like hatchlings. We did chores. Carried ammo. Cleaned blood off knives." Elias didn't interrupt. One day, Jack brought back a preacher's daughter. Said she'd sing them holy songs. She tried. They cut her tongue out anyway. Said she lied too sweet. Her voice never wavered. She died a week later. I buried her under a Joshua tree. Never told them. Elias felt something turn inside him. Slow, heavy, final. Maddie's eyes met his. "I remember everything. That night, she drew a map in the dirt. Hills, cliffs, an old mine the gang once used to store powder. She marked places with names only the damned would know. Bone Ridge, Widow's Bite, Hollow Scar. They'll come through the gulch," she said. "That's how they always do. Narrow one exit. They don't like being seen." Elias nodded. "We make our stand there." But when he woke before dawn, Maddie was gone. She'd left a note, scratched on the back of a tobacco box. "I remember who I am. I need to finish it. Asterisk, asterisk." She had taken one of the rifles, a satchel of rounds, and the stallion with the quiet hooves. Elias stared at the empty cot, heart drumming low like thunder underfoot. "You stubborn little fool," he muttered. He packed the remaining guns and followed. The trail was faint, but he knew her stride by now. She moved like a predator, not prey. Always uphill, always against the wind. She wasn't running. She was hunting. 3 miles out of town, he found the first body. One of the vultures, throat cut, eyes wide with disbelief. Maddie had dragged him behind a rock and left his rifle jammed with sand. A message. Farther along, another. Gunshot to the chest. Blood still wet. Another message. By sundown, Elias reached the edge of Dead Man's Gulch. The place was a scar in the earth, steep cliffs on either side, open sky like a mouth above. Echo swallowed sound here. No law existed inside these walls, only what men brought with them. He spotted movement near the ridge, slim frame, rifle poised. Maddie. She looked back once, saw him, didn't flinch. Then, from the far mouth of the gulch, the vultures arrived. 13 riders. Red coats like the ones she remembered. Dust trailing behind them like smoke from hell. At the front rode Red Jack, broad-shouldered, gray now in his beard, but still wearing that snake grin, and the duster dyed with old blood. Elias lowered his spyglass. "It's him," he whispered. Maddie took a long breath and said, "Then it ends tonight." The vultures didn't know it yet, but the hunter they'd left in the dirt was waiting, and she remembered everything. The sun dropped low behind the ridgeline, turning the sky a bruised red as though it, too, sensed the blood waiting to be spilled. Dead Man's Gulch, already steeped in legend and grit, held its breath beneath the creeping dusk. Shadows stretched long across the stone, and every whisper of wind through the ravine sounded like the hissing of ghosts. Elias crouched behind a twisted mesquite at the edge of the bluff, peering through the scope of his repeater. Maddie lay prone farther ahead, settled into a shallow cut in the earth where she had clear line of sight to the gulch's mouth. She had camouflaged herself with dust and thorn brush, barely distinguishable from the rock around her. Her breathing was steady, focused, controlled. 13 riders entered the gulch like kings returning to a ruined throne. Red Jack rode in front, his black stallion snorting clouds of dust with each step. His red duster flared behind him, heavy with trophies, scalps, bones, scraps of uniform. Behind him came the others, Silas One Eye, Canary with her golden scarf and serpent-quick hands, and 10 more bastards that Elias remembered only by the chaos they left behind. Laughter echoed off the walls. Loose, confident. They believed they owned this land. They didn't know it had turned against them. Elias adjusted his grip, waited for the signal. Maddie's fingers twitched. 1, 2, 3. A crack split the silence. Not thunder. Not a warning. A bullet screamed down the gulch and ripped through the neck of the second rider from the front. He dropped like a sack of grain, blood fontaining over his saddle. Before the others could react, a second shot rang out, this one punching through a rider's spine, dropping him with a scream that bounced off the canyon walls like a cursed prayer. The gulch erupted. Red Jack spun his horse behind a rock outcropping, barking orders. The vultures dismounted, scattering for cover, firing blindly into the stone. Dust exploded around Elias as slugs tore through the scrub near him. He waited, counted shots, moved low. Maddie had already disappeared. She was repositioning, just like he'd taught her. Below, Silas scrambled behind a fallen boulder, yanking a wounded man with him. Canary fired 2 rounds toward the ridge, then shouted, "Come out, Granger. Thought you were dead." Elias let his breath go slow. "You first," he called, then fired. His bullet clipped the edge of her cover, spraying stone shards across her cheek. She shrieked and dove aside. He moved again, crawling like a panther along the spine of the ridge, tracking shadows. He knew the terrain. The vultures didn't. One rose to fire and caught a shot through the thigh, then another through the jaw. Maddie, silent and precise. She was hunting, not defending. One by one, the numbers thinned. "Who the hell is that?" One of the vultures bellowed between rounds. Elias smiled. "She's the one you left behind." Red Jack's voice broke through the confusion. "Fall back. Circle wide." But the gulch didn't allow wide. It was a funnel of death, and now it was closing. Elias spotted Maddie again, her silhouette slipping across a low ledge above the canyon floor. She dropped behind a boulder, waited, then rose and shot. Another vulture screamed. Only 7 left now. Elias descended carefully down a goat path, staying out of view, until he was halfway down the canyon wall. He dropped behind an old mining cart rusted with time and looked across to where Jack crouched with 3 men and Canary. He lined up a shot, but something struck him, a sound, small and sharp, like flint on steel. A distraction. Canary leapt out and fired. The shot skimmed past his head and tore through his shoulder. He grunted, dropped back. Blood spread across his shirt like ink and water. He bit down hard, vision swimming. Below, Maddie moved faster. She rose from the slope with the sun at her back and walked straight into view, rifle in hand. No cover, no fear. The vultures froze. She fired once, Silas dropped. Again, Canary stumbled, clutching her chest, gasping. Then she faced Jack. "You remember me?" she shouted. His mouth opened. A twitch. A flicker of something almost like recognition. "You were one of mine," he said, voice low, hoarse. "Not anymore." Jack drew. Maddie didn't wait. Her bullet struck his hand, spinning the revolver from his grip. He roared in pain, dove for it. She advanced, boots crunching over stone. "Calm. Steady. You left me in the fire," she said. "Told me to burn. I spared you." He spat, cradling his wrist. "You weren't worth the bullet." She raised the rifle, pointed it at his chest. "This one's worth it." Before he could move, she fired. Red Jack jerked backward, hit the stone hard, and didn't rise again. Silence blanketed the gulch, the kind that feels earned, heavy and final. Elias staggered down the rest of the ridge, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He found her standing over Jack's body, rifle slack in her hands, chest rising and falling like the wind itself had been exorcised from her bones. "You did it," he said, voice gravel thick. She looked at him, eyes not hard, not broken, just free. "We did." They buried the bodies at the canyon's edge, not out of mercy, but finality. Let the rocks remember them. Let the wind carry their names away. As they stood over Jack's grave, Elias said, "You don't have to keep carrying it." She shook her head. "It's part of me, but it doesn't own me." They rode back to Dust Vale as the stars rose, scattered across the sky like a map only the lost could read. The town met them at the edge, silent and stunned. No cheers, just wide eyes and bowed heads. Ballard stepped forward. "How many?" Elias looked back once, then said, "Enough." He turned to Maddie. "You got a place here now." "You sure?" She looked past the buildings, beyond the church and the saloon and the stables, to the hills bathed in moonlight. "Not yet," she said. "But maybe." She walked beside him, quiet, steady. And in the distance, the gulch whispered its last goodbye. The mud never fully left her hands. Years later, when the children of Dust Vale came around asking for stories, she'd sit on the porch of the cabin Elias built with his one good arm and run her fingers over the grooves of the old rifle, half listening to the wind as it dragged the dust down from the hills, like old memories. They called her the Mud Girl, though few still remembered why. The story had changed in the telling. Some said she'd crawled out of a shallow grave and hunted the red vultures through the desert with the skinwalker's rage. Others swore she had no voice and spoke only in bullets. They said her eyes could stop a man cold, that she was born from the earth itself, raised by the bones of murdered travelers, fed on snake venom and fire. She never corrected them. Let the stories run wild. Better that than the truth. A girl left to die behind a barn, eating mud to stay alive until someone gave her a name and a place to stand. Sometimes Elias would come out with a tin mug of chicory and sit beside her. They'd rock in silence, two shadows at rest, bound by blood not shared but spilled together. His shoulder still ached on cold mornings. The bullet had gone clean through but left something behind, a weight that never let up. He never asked if she regretted it. He knew the answer. They both did. Dust Vale changed after Dead Man's Gulch. The town widened, leaned toward peace. Travelers passed through without fear, and the sheriff's badge stopped shaking on Ballard's chest. A new schoolhouse went up. The saloon was rebuilt with better glass. And the Red Vultures, once a name that made grown men flinch, became just another tale to keep the young from wandering too far at night. But not all tales fade. One day, a rider came in from Abilene, face sunburned, boots cracked, asking if the rumors were true, if the Mud Girl still lived. Maddie had been hauling feed when she heard. She didn't turn around, just said, "Depends what you heard." He said he'd heard she killed 13 men alone, that she stared down Red Jack and never blinked, that she was faster than rattlesnake spit and quieter than a prayer at midnight. She shrugged. "Sounds like a good story." He nodded, watching her. "Suppose it is." Then he tipped his hat and rode on. Later that night, Elias asked her what she would have done if the man came looking for trouble. She said he would not have gotten far. He smiled and poured another drink. As the years passed, the scars softened but never vanished. Maddie still had dreams, dust and fire, the howl of a man realizing he was no longer in control. But when she woke, it wasn't fear that lingered. It was purpose. It was peace. She started training girls from the edge ranches, ones who'd lost fathers or brothers, ones who stared too long at knives and didn't flinch. She taught them to track, to shoot, to wait, not to kill, to survive. "You're not made for vengeance," she told them. "You're made for living through what tries to stop you." And they listened. Elias aged slower than time allowed. His hands stiffened, his eyes faded, but he still carved shapes from old wood, built fences with perfect corners, and whispered lessons into the bones of the house. He called Maddie Girl long after she was grown, but when he said it, it wasn't small. It was sharp, proud, like a knife honed from a shared past. One spring, when the canyons were blooming and the rain came for once on time, a traveler's wagon broke a wheel near the riverbed. Maddie and Elias rode out with a hammer and a team of mules. They fixed it in half a day. The woman riding inside never gave her name, but before she left, she asked if it was true the Mud Girl lived out here. Maddie just looked at Elias. "She lives," he said, "but she doesn't haunt." The woman smiled, a sad kind of smile. "Then I suppose she's not a legend after all." But Maddie shook her head. No, she said. That's exactly why she is. The woman left, and the sun dipped behind the rim of the world. That night, under stars that looked like bullet holes in the sky, Maddie sat out with her boots off, legs stretched toward the fire. Elias dozed beside her, hat pulled low. She watched the flames dance and thought about how far she'd come, from that dirt hole behind the barn to the wide quiet of the hills. She still carried the mud girl inside her, that desperate, hollow-eyed creature who had nothing but hate and instinct and a will to crawl toward the sound of a man's voice. But now, that girl was no longer afraid. She wasn't starving. She wasn't lost. She was home, and the land, dry, cracked, blood-soaked, had finally given her back to herself.